The last video in the series is going to be working on taking user input and giving some dynamic feedback and allowing the user to get some type of result from what they type in. So for this one, we're going to open up 9-5. Let's go ahead and save it in your project folder as math. We're going to be doing some calculations. All right, so as you get it opened up and look at your timeline, we got 5 different layers. And when you play it, we just have a start screen where the user is going to be able to type in their name. And then we have a second screen where they're going to be able to type in some numbers and then calculate, do some type of operation and get a total. At the top, there's going to be a welcome screen based on what they type in. So whatever they type their name in at, there's going to be a welcome at the top here. And it just shows how you can use dynamic text and input boxes to grab and use different input. All right, so go ahead and select frame 1 in the input name layer. And we're going to use the text tool. But make sure in the properties panel that you set this to classic text and input text, because the user is going to be able to type in some stuff. Change the font family to whatever you like. I'm going to use Arial. And I'm going to make it bold text. I'm going to change the font size to 18 point. And I'm going to use a color of 990000. Matches the color that's up here for the math game. I'm going to make sure that the border shows around the text and behavior is single line. Align the text to the left. The show border button is right here, in case you didn't know. There you go. And I'm just going to draw a text box on the stage. Okay, if it seems a little bit too big, you can always resize it and center it how you want to. All right, if I double click on it, you'll be able to see how large the text is, and that can kind of gauge how large you want the text box to be. So I'll kind of shrink it down a little bit. All right, go ahead and select the text box you just put in there, and we're going to give it an instance name so we can reference it in code. And I'm just going to call it input name box, and all in camel case. All right, just to make sure that we can type something in, I'm going to go ahead and test it. And okay, for some reason we're getting some kind of bug. Oh, that's right. In the output, it says that fonts should be embedded. And to be able to use fonts for input or to be edited at runtime, we have to embed them. I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. We're going to need to fix that to make this work. All right, go ahead and select the text box. And in the properties panel next to the style is the embed button. Go ahead and click that. And it opens up this dialog box where we can go ahead and embed the fonts for input. So instead of doing all, we're just going to check some boxes here. We're going to do uppercase, lowercase, numerals, and punctuation. That should be good enough. When you click the plus button, that adds a new font, and then clicking OK goes ahead and embeds that font. So now when we test the movie, you no longer get that output message. And now the text should work clear. Yep, we can type in numerals, we can type in punctuation. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so if I type in my name and I click the enter button, the functionality was already in there, the code was already in our timeline. But now we have to code in to see the welcome message and then what we're going to do with these boxes here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code. On frame 1 in the actions layer, we have the stop action, the enter button, so that's this instance right here. We have the instance name. Event listener, on a mouse click, it's going to run this function. Here's our function right here. It's not returning anything, it's a mouse event, and it's going to skip to frame 5. All right, well, if we go to frame 5, all we have is a stop right now. We're going to go ahead and edit that. Let's go ahead and put a new layer, and let's put it above the input name layer, and I'm going to call it hello. This is going to be a place for our welcome message. I'm going to insert a keyframe on frame 5, and that'll give us a place to put our welcome message. All right, so I'm going to use the text tool yet again. It's going to be a classic text, but now we want it to be dynamic text because it's going to receive input from some other function or object. And I'm going to go ahead and create a text box at the top here and resize it. Let's go ahead and give it an instance name of my welcome. Okay, we're going to go back to frame 1 on the actions layer, and now we're going to type in some code here so that we can grab whatever the user types in to this first text box. After stop, but before the event listener, we're going to type my name. We're going to type var my name, and it's going to be a type string. So we're creating a string variable, which is basically just going to hold a line of text, and we're calling it my name. And at first, we're just going to initialize it to hold an empty string. So there's no characters in the line of text. Okay, inside the function, when the button is clicked, before the go-to line, that's important. We want it to basically save the text before it goes to in play. We're going to assign my name to whatever's in the input name box. So if we just did this, we're assigning a string to an object. That is a big no-no. When you make an assignment right here, it has to be the same type of object, the same type of variable, whether it be a string equal to a string, a number equal to a number, object equal to object, whatever. So we need to grab the input name box, but then grab the text property. And this is a string. So now we're setting this string equal to whatever's the text property is of the text box. Hopefully that was clear. Replay it if it's not. Moving on. We're going to go to frame 5 in the actions layer, and we'll code out the rest of this. After the stop line, let's go ahead and type in my welcome dot text. So now we're assigning the text property of our welcome text box. We're going to set it equal to hello, a comma with a space. And now to add something to the end of that, we're going to use plus symbol and just use the variable that we put on the first frame, my name. Okay, so this will put this entire text inside the text box. All right, let's go ahead and save that, Control S, and test it out. So I'm going to type in my name, hit enter, and bam, there's our text. Now mine was a little too big, it kind of went off the screen. You can make the text smaller, you can make it multi-line, however you want it to show there. I don't want to get too fancy with that, you can experiment. All right, now let's get the calculator part to work. So the next thing we want to do is to set the instance names for each of these text boxes. So for the one under first number, I'm just going to call first num, camel case. Similar to the second one, second num, num for number. And then the one at the bottom, the text box, click on it, it's going to have an instance name of total amount or total AMT. We'll go ahead and do our buttons as well. So this one's going to be plus button, BTN for button, minus button, multiply button, and divide button. All right, now that we got our instances all set up, I'll click frame 5 in the actions layer, and we'll put some more code in. Okay, beneath the my welcome line, we'll add in the event listener. And I guess we'll start with the plus button. And we're going to call a function called add total. All right, because that's what the plus button should do. It should add the two numbers in the two top text boxes and put it in the total box. All right, let's go ahead and create our function for add total. There we are. And so now we need to create variables to hold the number that is in each box. So we're going to assign a variable that we're going to call num1. So that's going to be the number that's here. And we're going to grab whatever was typed into the first num box. But again, it needs to be a string. So we need to not just grab the object, we need to grab the text property of the object and assign it to the number. So this string is being casted to a number, which is then being assigned to num1. So then we can use that later. Very similarly, we're going to do that for the second text box. So we'll just call it num2. We'll grab the second text box and assign that text to the number. Now we'll do the calculation. We're going to create another variable called total, and that's going to be equal to the two numbers added together. And there's our assignment. So num1 plus num2 is whatever the total is, and it assigns it there. This won't actually display it in this text box. We need one more line of code. Total amount, so this grabs this instance, text box, dot text, assigning the text property to whatever the total is. So 4 lines of code inside of our function. All right, we'll go ahead and save that and test it out. Type in a name. I'll try something shorter. There we go. Type in a first number, type in the second number, hit the plus button. There's our total. All right, these input boxes were already set up for input, and this text box down here was already set up for dynamic, so we didn't need to change those. Try it again, 6 and -4. Add it together, we get a 2. Try some decimals. That works too. All right, I challenge you guys to go through and set up the operations for the other buttons. Give you a second there to pause the video and give that a shot before moving on. And I'll show you here in a second. To set up operations for these other buttons, I'm just going to copy these lines of code and change what we need to for each button. So the minus button, change it there. I'm going to use a new function called minus total. I need to change it in both places, so now this event is going to call this function. We still have 2 numbers, and I'm allowed to use the same variable names here because these are being created inside of a function. So these variables are totally different than these variables because they're local variables. They are outside of the scope. All right, so these 2 lines are actually going to be the same, but now instead of the total being the addition of those 2, I'm just going to change that to subtraction. The rest of that's the same. Well, that was pretty easy. Do the same thing for the multiply button. And I'll change the function name to multiply total. So I need to change the function name down here. And change this to multiplication. For multiplication, you're just going to use an asterisk or shift 8, or it's in the top right if you have a numpad. And last one, divide button, divide total in 2 places. And for division, you just use a slash. Okay, you can either use the one next to the right shift key, or again, it's on the top of the numpad. All right, I'll go ahead and save that. Hopefully we typed everything in right, and we won't get any errors. Uh-ohs, we did get an error. You can definitely tell by what was planned there. So it tells me scene 1, the actions layer, obviously that's where we put all our code, frame 5, line 23. Undefined property, multiply total. All right, let's check that out. Oop, just spelled multiply wrong, that's all. Okay. Simple mistype. Try that again. No errors. All right. Enter a name, first number, second number. add, subtract, multiply, divide. Okay, now this will go on forever. Notice I can highlight to the right. Guess I shouldn't have said forever, but there is a stopping point. It just shows quite a few places. You could limit this text box to only show so many decimal places by changing the length. I'll leave it to you to figure that out. Just leave questions in the video if you need help, or raise your hand in class. So you have just learned how to create variables and set them up to handle input text for a project.